By the end of this year, I would have taught over 6,000 classes. Wow. And over the last 8 years, I learned 3 strategies that took me from a boring teacher that just lectured at every class to a effective communicator that can help students understand difficult concepts like that. And this ability has not only helped me land a job and do well at one of the most prestigious high schools in China, it's also helped me get students into some of the most prestigious universities in the world. And you see, it doesn't matter if you have the best ideas if you can't communicate them. And so the things I'm about to share with you, like the 2-1 rule, are things that you can implement immediately in order to become a more effective communicator. You see, there are 3 reasons why we communicate. Number 1, to build bridges. Number 2, to plant new ideas. And then number 3, we communicate to help people adopt new behaviors. And it all starts with one thing that makes 80% of the difference. I want you to entertain the idea that there are multiple yous. And let me explain. This makes sense because there are multiple yous. You're probably a son or daughter. You're probably a husband or wife. You're probably a cousin. You're probably a friend. You're probably whatever you do at work. And so you already have multiple identities. Depending on who you talk to, you adopt a certain identity. And Todd Herman, a coach who has helped successful business owners and athletes, talks about this in his book, Alter Ego. He says that if you want to do something extraordinary, you have to put on the cape of an extraordinary person. You have to go into your alter ego. And that's kind of what a frame is. A frame determines how you communicate in a given situation, and it accounts for your nonverbal communication, which makes up 80% of your communication. And so when I communicate with colleagues or students at work, I like to don the frame of a collaborative problem solver. And so what do? I'm asking questions. I'm giving alternatives that might solve the problem. I'm listening very intently and carefully. And so now you can begin to think about what the picture of an effective communicator looks like and just adopt those traits. And here are a few traits that I've identified competent communicators have over the years. They are a good listener that can paraphrase what the other person says to express understanding. They are focused on the conversation without any distraction. They lean in appropriately to show that they care and they pay attention. They're comfortable in the conversation and they're able to make jokes and laugh with whoever they're talking with. They speak clearly to show forethought and confidence. They ask open-ended questions to get the person to share more about themselves. And they also use questions to help the other person convince themselves instead of pontificating and preaching to convince the other person. And if you're able to adopt those traits, then congratulations. You're on the way to adopting the frame of a successful communicator. So let's pretend you've now donned the cape of an effective communicator. Whatever you say with confidence. But what do you actually say? Which brings me to the second lesson. So the ultimate goal, especially in education, is to figure out why others think a certain way. And then afterwards, inviting them to think differently. And so by doing that, inform new sets of behaviors that will give them better feedback. And at the same time, you're also keeping an open mind because they might also have a great idea. And so to implement this, you use something called the 2-1 rule. And this is actually something I learned from an ex-CIA officer that was interviewed by Stephen on the Diary of a CEO. And the 2-1 rule stands for 2 questions, 1 idea, which means you're only allowed to share something that is a part of your world and your perspective and something you want to impose on someone else to correct their thinking, to motivate different behaviors, you're only allowed to share that idea after you've asked 2 questions. Because the goal of any conversation, first and foremost, is to build a connection, is to build bridges, is to show that you understand and you care about their context, especially with solution-oriented conversations, like you're trying to coach someone and we're working through a problem together. You want to show that you understand that problem first, and that you understand that problem in the perspective of whoever you're talking to. And so you do so by articulating their feelings, their ideas, their thoughts, and by asking them questions because you're genuinely curious about their human experience. And the more that person shares, the more they will feel connected to you, and the more accepting they will be when you share an idea with them that might be different from their worldview or perspective. And so in terms of questions, any question that gets them to go deeper into why they're thinking what they're thinking. And in education, we'd call that metacognitive questioning. And any question that gets them to reflect on their existing state are examples of good questions. And so these are questions like, why do you think this way? Or what moments or belief or knowledge led you to believe this? Or what was your thought process behind this decision or action? You also want to show with questioning that you understand how they feel and where they are at and what they mean. And you do this by saying things like, let me see if I get what you're thinking. And then you try your best to paraphrase what they've said. And you do this genuinely because you want to know you're receiving the right message from them. You want a sufficient understanding of where the person is at before you help them. Then you can share a similar experience you've had in your life. This is usually the time when I share my own perspective on how I would approach a problem. And I invite the student or the colleague to assess the pros and cons of my idea. And I make them a part of the solution by letting them assemble their own opinion based on the facts and logic. The goal is to introduce new ideas and let whoever you're talking to come to their own conclusions about something. Because that's what informs new behaviors, and new behaviors are evidence of learning. And so the last tip that I want to go over is the tip I would give anyone if I could only give one tip on how to communicate effectively. It's important to speak specifically because specific instruction is actionable instruction. There are so many examples of me making this mistake in the past where I tell a student or someone I'm working with to teach in a more student-centered way or to learn more independently. But if somebody isn't doing that, chances are they don't know how to do that. And for me to tell them to learn independently, for me to tell them to teach in a more student-centered way, assumes the idea that they know exactly what to do and how to get there, when in reality they don't, because if they did, they would be doing that. And so I realized then I need to break it down. I need to break down, for example, what independent learning means. Okay, so independent learning means you're able to sift out the important information from the unimportant information. Independent learning means you're able to find your own practice questions to do. Independent learning means you have the ability to ask content-related questions and you are able to identify your mastery over a specific topic. And so Alex Hormozi gives a very, very good example of this when he says telling somebody to be charismatic isn't helpful, But if you think about the specifics behind what it means to be charismatic, right? Say hi and goodbye every time you come in or leave the room. You smile when you talk to people. You ask good questions. You maintain eye contact. You stand up straight. You speak slowly with confidence in good tone. If you're able to do all of these things, people will look at you and be like, wow, that person is charismatic. But just telling someone to be charismatic, if that person doesn't know what charismatic actually looks like, is not very helpful. And so every time you're educating someone or you're communicating with someone or you're trying to help someone adopt new sets of behaviors and new ideas, you need to be specific in how you communicate. And in order to speak specifically, you have to understand where your audience is at. I would have a very different conversation with a grade 12 who has read second year university level economics textbooks than a grade 10 who is totally new to the subject. Just like how you would speak differently about work to a colleague you've known for many years versus a totally new employee that just got the job and does not know anything. And so if you want to actually learn how to communicate effectively, you actually need a framework for how learning actually works, which I go over in this video. And if you learn this framework, you'd be able to exponentially increase your own rate of learning, no matter what you're learning. So watch this video right here to learn more about learning.